Welcome to Interviews with Indie Authors. I'm your host, Winona Vale, and today we have with us Abel Zavala and Rios de la Luz. Abel Zavala is the author of When Palomas Visit, and Rios is the author of Itza and Alter Stories to Liminal Saints in a Pulse Between Dimensions in the Desert. Thank you so much for being here today. So, before we start off our episode, I feel like we cannot continue without acknowledging what's happening within our country and what's happening in LA and other cities being unjustly raided by ICE and our constitutional rights being infringed upon. We do have the right to protest, and our current administration is authoritarian and fascist, and I want to take a moment to point out that we do have rights. So I want to take a moment to give the floor to Abel to go over those with you guys.
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you, Winona, for what you're doing for us and the authors, and of course for bringing this up because it is vitally important. I also want to say hi to Rios because finally get to interact a little bit since we've all kind of met on social media, but it's really, I got really excited when I was saying, hey, I'm bringing Rios along. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. But no, I completely agree with you that right now we have to speak up. I haven't felt too comfortable promoting myself unless I said something. And I work in radio in Ohio, and it's upon my responsibilities, but also something that I feel that I have to do is inform our public, particularly our undocumented community, to let them know, like you said, that we have rights, whether you're in this country undocumented or you're here legally. And there's a lot of factors, but it's important. More thing else is that you know that there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of people that will help you out. So just to not extend this too long, one of the things that I recorded recently is the fact that, like you said, we have the right to protest. That's one of our rights for anyone that will be watching this, and I'll say this in Spanish in a moment, but whether you're here documented or not, you have the right to not say anything if you're confronted with an officer. If you have an officer or you have someone from ICE come to your home, or they come in your car and they ask you to open the door, you have the right to not do that. Don't do that. And of course, more than anything, you have the right to speak with an attorney. And just to clarify the attorney part, if someone is in this country that's undocumented, that's an immigrant, they need to speak with an immigration attorney. And for anyone that's a U.S. citizen and we're confronted with ICE or anyone that violates our rights, you speak with a civil rights attorney. It's important that we know the distinction, because me as a U.S. citizen, it's not going to benefit me speaking with an immigration attorney. I know that I should speak with a civil rights attorney. So these are little things to remember. And then also for all of those that don't speak the language and they need help, there's what they call the red card. It's right now I just printed a regular piece of paper, but it essentially says it in Spanish as well as in English. These are my rights. I'm not going to open the door. I'm not going to sign anything, and I'm going to give this to the agent. To summarize this in Spanish, para los que vayan a ver este episodio, recuerden que tienen derechos, estén aquí en este país con documentos o sin documentos. Saber de que si algún agente de ICE, algún oficial llega y les pide que abran la puerta de su casa, de su auto, no la abran. Tienen el derecho de hablar con algún abogado. Y también, and I forgot to mention this too, no firmen sin hablar con algún abogado. Y si algún oficial le dice que tiene una orden de arresto, asegúrense de que la orden que le entreguen, tienen que entregarle, mostrarles algo, tiene que ser firmada. If you have an agent that says they have a warrant, make sure that they show it to you and that it's signed by a judge. That's very important. Y para terminar, hay lo que les llaman las tarjetas rojas, que les da la información en su idioma, en español, para que así puedan entregárselas a los agentes. Recuerden que estén aquí en ese país con o sin documentos, tienen derechos. y siempre consulte con expertos como abogados, con noticieros que son que les dan información válida para que se mantengan informados. La información es muy importante. It's important that we keep educating ourselves and that we listen to experts on these matters, and that you rely on trusted resources, new sources that give you the right information. And with that, let's keep fighting.
Yes, thank you so much for speaking on that. I really, truly appreciate that. And in this moment, I just want to light a candle in acknowledgement of those fighting on the ground. If I can light it, hold on. Hold on. There we go. Acknowledgement for those fighting on the ground, and all of those who are raising their voices, for those who cannot raise their voices, and for all those who are affected. I pray for your protection.
I mentioned that I work in radio. One of the things that I mentioned, in fact, today was the fact that if there's someone out there that is scared to go out there and fight and they can't, just remember that there's other people that can do it for you. So yeah, the most important thing is be informed and keep fighting for this race. We really have to.
Yes, exactly. And also, I want to talk more about you being on radio. That's really interesting.
Of course.
Okay, so take a deep breath. Okay, so, whew, sorry, that was a lot. Okay, so let's talk about your books. Abel, would you like to go first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Okay,
thank
so
you for doing this for us indie authors, and I'm beyond excited to do this. Well, real quick, my novel is When Palomas Visit. It's I like to say it's a time travel story with magical realism elements. I didn't really consider it magical realism until a poet author friend said, I really like the magical realism elements in the sense that my character travels back in time after he finds what he thought was a long lost VHS tape. The only thing is that with magical realism, there has to be there can't be a reason for the magic. In this case, there is a reason behind why he goes back in time. So that's why I always say it's a time travel story with magical realism elements. And essentially, it was a way for me to heal. My mother passed away when I was a child, so I've Mother's Day and Father's Day have always been a little bit difficult for me. So this kind of gave me a chance to heal and in a sense to talk to her and to have her with me via the main character Damian, via his mother Paloma, and also via another character that comes along later on, which I don't talk a lot about him because she comes in later on, but it's essentially if my mother were alive, if she were in her 70s as she should be, she would have been now. That's who she would be in my mind, at least.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Can we talk a bit about your cover for a second? It's so beautiful.
Honestly, my wife did an amazing job. She's a little shy, so I'd be like, hey, come on over. But I give her the kudos. I mean, the two people that I always give who get their credit are my wife for the cover and my editor. She's Guatemalan, Marcelita. I found her on TikTok, and I give her a lot of credit too because she made the story so much better than what I could have imagined. But as far as the cover, so I told my wife, I said, I want to be a sort of like a silhouette of a house where the character finds the video cassette, and then eventually, I think one day I said, I kind of want to do a VHS tape. So she started playing around with it, and funny enough, when she showed me the first, what she made the first time, she did an amazing job. I really can't say more other than how much I love it.
That was initially what drew me in was the cover. I love collecting old things, specifically VHS tapes. So that was one thing that I was like, oh my gosh, I have to have this. I believe it was Natalia Hernandez that brought you to my server. I think she like tagged you in a post or something, and the fact that she even saw my post is like absolutely insane to me because I really admire her. So thank you to her. Shout out to her. Love to have you on the podcast. Rios, can you tell us a little bit about your books? You can start with whichever one you like.
Yes. Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. And just right off the bat, I like to let people know that I definitely have anxiety. So if I start to like seem like I'm floating away somewhere, that's probably why.
Oh, it's okay. You can't see me, but I'm floating as well.
Yeah. So there's that. I'm Rios de la Luz. My pronouns are she, her. I have one novella, 2 short story collections. I can talk about my novella first. So my novella is Itza. Itza is about a family of water witches living in a border town. This story is told in vignettes and fragments. It's a story about what trauma does to someone's life. And it's a story about what it means to start healing.
Mm-hmm.
So similar to Abel, I wrote this as a like little fragment of my own life story, and I hyper fictionalized it, and it was one of the ways that I was able to find healing for myself. Outside of that, I wrote this book as a spell. So I wrote this book as a spell on behalf of the main character, whose name is Marisol. So she goes through some traumatic things in the book as a child, and I wanted to be able to give her justice in a way that doesn't happen to survivors in this reality. So let me see what else. I have my notes here.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so we follow Marisol, and we get to know her. We get to know the matriarchs in her family, her sister Araceli, her mother Magdalena. Marisol is a queer Chicana, and she's dealing with grief and the mourning of her body. And yeah, she finds light and safety in her community and connection to her ancestors. So that is Itza. And I have 2 short story collections. So the very first book that I wrote, it's The Pulse Between Dimensions and the Desert. And I would say that this one is, in a way, it's a love letter to El Paso. So I was born in Los Angeles, but I was born there, and then we moved right away to El Paso, and we moved between El Paso and Juarez, like when I was a baby. And then I ended up growing up in El Paso throughout my childhood. And so a lot of the Pulse Between Dimensions in the Desert is pulling from family stories, pulling from the retail jobs that I was doing, pulling from just personal stories and fictionalizing them. So that's this one. And I just call it Pulse, but there's a lot of Spanglish in this. I was really having fun with the musicality that happens when you mix English and Spanish, and how that comes out in a sentence. So that's Pulse. And then I have An Altar of Stories to Liminal States. So this is my newest short story collection. I call it my postpartum short story collection. I didn't write anything for a really long time. I gave birth at this point 4 years ago. And I really wanted to explore motherhood. I wanted to explore the occult, horror, and of course, what it is to be queer, Chicana, Guatemalteca, all those elements into this little book. So yeah, that's An Altar of Stories to Liminal States. My titles are very long, but
I love it. It keeps them memorable. It really does. Okay, so first of all, happy Pride Month. I forgot to say that. It was a little heavy in the beginning, but happy Pride. So first of all, I just wanted to say thank you to both of you. One, for being here, and 2, I as we talked about before we started recording, I don't speak Spanish, and the Spanglish made it feel accessible, and it felt almost like giving me permission to dive into that part of myself. And also the, oh gosh, what is it? The Name Bearer series, also by Natalia Hernandez. Shout out you again. Because again, the Spanglish in that really just helped me feel comfortable reclaiming that aspect of myself and my heritage and my culture. So I just wanted to say thank you. And it is very beautiful and magical and musical, as you put it. It really does add so much to both of your stories.
Yeah, I think I completely I agree with you that there's a magic in the way that how we communicate. And I don't know if it was Natalia's book. Was she also the one that wrote the one about the person who speaks with animals? I think it was her.
I don't know. I know she talks to the flowers, and
Okay, I thought it was
maybe
her, but
she
I
might.
wrong.
I haven't read
But
her other books.
There was an author that whose book I read that kind of did mix a little bit of English and Spanish and Spanglish, and that was one of the things that I kind of my editor was a little iffy on, but I kind of just wanted to stick with a lot of the stuff that I have in there that's either Spanglish or Spanish. And like I've told some of my non-Spanish speaking friends, I've asked, were you able to understand what I wrote there? Because typically I would justify, for example, there's a scene where Damian thinks back to the accident that happened with his mother, Paloma, and he says, something like, I remember my father asking me, ¿Por qué no te fijabas por donde ibas? And it was just not only the fact that he remembered that in Spanish, but the way his father said it. And then I followed that up with, right, why didn't I watch where I was going? Little things like that. And my friend said, yeah, no, it was very easy to understand. So I think that aspect of our language it's vital. It's important to the stories that we're bringing.
Yes, I very much, and it's so interesting that you use that exact quote, because I was reading both of your books this morning, and I remember specifically stumbling upon that and not even needing to translate it, because I had Google Translate at the radio. I was like, hold on, let me figure out exactly what they're saying. And I was like, oh wait, context clues, you just kind of figure it out. And oh gosh, I was gonna say something on top of that. Oh, and not only just the inspiration of reading the books and feeling connected to the Spanglish in that way, but on top of that, it made me rethink the entire fantasy book that I'm writing, because it made me realize that I want to include Spanglish. I want to include Mexican elements and, mythology to it. And it totally changed the story, and it changed everything. And I took a break from writing it for about a year, and I realized that break was for this, because I couldn't have written the story that I wanted to write without the Spanish influence, without the Mexican influence. So again, I just want to say thank you for that, because I'll shout you out whenever it comes out that y'all were the reason it is the way it is, because it truly changed my life reading your books, because I didn't even know I needed that. I didn't know I need to feel not the permission, but the closeness to the language. And it made me realize that, although I grew up in a Mexican American Italian household, I did have moments where I connected to the stories, whether it was the chorizo and eggs, or whether it was the loving the chola aesthetic. It really just felt really close to my heart. So I just wanted to put that out there. And then back to the questions. I wanted to ask you guys, what was life like before you started writing? So either, whatever, you guys can go first.
Do you want to start this time, Rios?
Sure. Okay. So I don't know how this is going to sound, but I feel like storytelling is just something that I do it because it feels like it's ancestral in a way. Like it feels like I have to do it. Like I wouldn't feel right. I wouldn't feel balanced if I wasn't writing stories. And that would be whether or not, published or not. It's just something that I've always been drawn to. So I've written since I was a kid. And initially when I started writing, it was, I word it this way, but it was a survival mechanism. It was a way for me to understand what was happening in the world around me. And that's why I grasped onto stories. And then from there, as a teenager, I wrote really bad poetry.
Yeah, same.
Like just like dramatic and angry. And
so dramatic.
All of that. On the page. Yeah. So,
the bad part.
Yeah.
Like I'm not a poet. I love poetry, but I myself am not a poet. But yeah, writing has just always been there. Storytelling has always been there. Like the fascination with stories, wanting to consume as many kinds of stories from many different mediums has always been something that like I thrive in that. I love to do that. I would say the only time that maybe there was a before writing is I just worked retail for a really long time, like 10 years, just worked retail. I was doing like 2 jobs at the same time, going to school, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I finally fell back into writing when I moved to the Pacific Northwest. I moved to Portland in 2014. And I started writing again. Out there. And then that just like set me off again to continue my journey. So yeah, just really mundane, just working and I guess growing as a person, waiting for my prefrontal cortex to like fully develop and all that. And then I started rewriting when I was like 27 or so is when I really got back into it. But yes.
Yeah, I think my life changed when I turned 25. It's like my brain was like, your final form. Like, really, game changer. I highly recommend it.
Absolutely.
Abel, same question to you. I'll repeat it in case you forgot. What was life like for you before you started writing?
Well, I want to say I've always been a very imaginative person, and I think part of it is because when I was a child, I was the youngest between my siblings. They on my mother's side, who I grew up with, they were much older than me. So a lot of times I ended up just using my imagination to create worlds, and eventually I fell in love with stories. Like you said, it's something ancestral, and just watching movies and reading books and just kind of subconsciously making a note of how stories work. And I kind of started writing a little bit when I did go to college. I took a introduction to world mythology class, and I remember I wrote this story about this person who dies and comes back, and I really don't remember what it was about. I just know that I got a C, like a C plus in it. I was like, okay, well, this may not be so bad for me. And I kind of just dabbled in writing things on my own. I never published anything. And it wasn't until we moved to Cincinnati from Chicago that I started kind of finding my voice and finding groups of people that I could connect with, not only in radio, but also in theater and also in improv. And all those little things eventually led me to writing. And it was through a newspaper, the Spanish language newspaper, where I would bring my love for movies and kind of apply those little story techniques that I kind of knew or I read about via other books. I did I had bought other books on the craft of writing, but there was always that limiting factor of, I don't know if I'm good enough to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So with those little things, I think that kind of did help me start writing these articles in my own voice. And my editor would say, you should keep writing the way that you do, from the heart. So eventually I moved on from writing movie reviews to articles, profiles, etc., etc. And along the way, I took improv classes, and I would, after like 20 years, I did audition for a play, etc. So going back to writing, one day, shortly after COVID restrictions started lifting, a friend of mine who's also I consider a mentor, he offered on becoming an author class.
Ooh.
And it was one of those things where in the back of my mind, and also written somewhere, I had one of those things like, before I die, I'm going to write a book.
Mm-hmm.
So I told my wife, I said, I'm going to take Victor's class. And she's like, go for it. And one of the things about me is that when I decide I want to do something, I just, like, the next day I sign up for it. So,
I love that.
Regardless of what I say, I'm already signed up. And so I took Victor's class, and even though it was more on the mechanics of becoming an author, he didn't really focus on the writing aesthetics and writing fiction. He writes fiction, and he threw a little bit on there, so I understood what he was saying, and that's where eventually I started playing with the idea of When Palomas Visit. And in a big part, it's because I had read a book when I was younger about this character that reunites with his mother after 10 years since her passing via an accident. And that book always stuck in the back of my mind. So I kind of always wanted to write a similar book, but also a book, Latino book.
Mm-hmm.
So taking Victor's class was kind of the first push that I had to start writing the story. I want to say maybe like 3 years ago, there's another local Cincinnati author, and he also owned a bookstore. He started offering free workshops, and I said, you know what, I'm going to do it. I took his workshops, and that's where I kind of started diving myself more into the story, and that's where I started creating the story. And from the moment that I started writing news articles, movie reviews, and just finding this artistic side that I had when I was in Chicago when I was a kid, finding it here in Cincinnati, way past my 25 years of age. I'm like late 30s, early 40s. I mean, I'm already in my close to mid 40s. That really just, I can't imagine not writing anymore.
Mm-hmm. Something you reminded me of, I had met this woman at work, and I'm a little hesitant sometimes to tell people what I do outside of, the 9 to 5. And I could just tell it was going to be a good conversation. And I was telling her about the podcast and the newspaper. And she goes, oh, I've always wanted to write a book. I had so many ideas, and they kind of just fizzled out. So this is to everyone out there, like, don't give up on those dreams. Like, it can happen for you anytime. Like, just keep writing, keep practicing. And on that note, Rios, I know that on your social media, I've seen a couple of times you do like writing prompts, and I believe you do like workshops, like classes. I think I saw that.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. Okay. So I'm just dramatic. It's okay. So I want to say that one of the very first writing workshops that I ever took, like, it changed my life. And the reason it changed my life, similar to Abel, like, I had this story within me, and it wasn't until I decided to, like, take a chance and go to this class that I was like, holy
you can cuss. You're good. You're good.
I was like, holy, like, I have this story, like, I call it a body story. So the writing workshop that I took, it's called Corporeal Writing. I took it with Lydia Yuknovich, and it just, like, did something to me. It just changed something within me. So after taking a couple of writing workshops, I started thinking, I think this is something that I could do. I feel like a skill that I have is the ability to bring stories out of people, and with the writing prompts that I come up with, and something that was really important to me was accessibility. So like making these writing workshops, but then also making sure that they're affordable, making sure that there are scholarships that are included, so folks who can't have any sort of financial barrier, like they can take the class if they want. Literally, all they have to do is DM me, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. Like it doesn't, there is something, and I'm going to use the word magic because I do. Along the lines with magical realism, I just feel like magic is an actuality. Like it is part of this reality, right? I'm someone who I practice witchcraft,
Same.
and but there is this sort of alchemy that happens, whether it's on Zoom or whether it's live with in person. But when people are creating together, when people are writing their stories together, there is just something to that. And I think that's one of my favorite parts about being able to create those spaces is, you get to experience the magic of, anywhere from like 5 to 10 people writing together. And everyone, has, whether we, because as humans, we're all going to touch on similar themes in our lives, but we all have very specific ways in which we are going to tell our stories. And this is just the truth. Like you're gonna have a very unique way of looking at something like grief or love or motherhood, whatever the theme may be. Your eyes have a unique perspective to it. And I think that's the other part of the magic within a writing workshop is, folks are putting the energy on the page, they're sharing the energy. And, I love that aspect of it. So, I'm someone who, I love sharing with people, like take a workshop, take a generative workshop, and just write with people, or look for free workshops. There's a lot of people who do offer free writing workshops, or go to a writing group and just write together, because there is something in that. And also writing, being a writer, being an author, it's very solitary. It feels that way, right? Like you're in your world, and whether you're looking at a blank page or your first draft, whatever, but with workshops or with writing groups, it's just a reminder. It's so funny. This is just how we are, right? We just need that reminder that we're not alone. Like we're not alone in this creative process. We're not alone in maybe feeling frustrated that we can't write well every single day. But yeah, we're also not alone in the successes of, like I finally finished my book, or I finally finished this story, or talking with another writer, I figured out how to end a story. Like there's this. I feel like with writing workshops, there's the potential for community, and so I do love that about writing workshops. This year I'm not offering any this year just because I'm focusing on a novel, but yes, usually I do have like writing workshops that I offer. Thank you for asking.
Yes, of course. You have definitely convinced me, both of you, that I need to take a workshop and really just dive into that, because between you both and E.A. Noble, my last interview, she was also speaking on that. And you're right, writing does truly feel very solitary at times. So I really do think that now that I've realized what I want to do with my character and making her queer and Hispanic and speaking in Spanglish and all of those things, now I feel ready to enter into that workshop setting, because before I was just floundering, just throwing ideas at the wall, seeing what sticked. But now I feel like I could actually utilize the information there. And can you shout out your social media, both of you, so that way we know where to find you, your books, and your beautiful writing prompts? Yeah, you go.
Okay, yeah. So my across Instagram and TikTok, it's Rios de la Luz, RIOSDE. DELALUZ. I'm like, how do I spell it? So yeah, at Rios de la Luz, TikTok, Instagram. I don't have a Facebook. I don't have a Twitter. I have a Blue Sky. I haven't been on there in a minute, but yes, across everywhere.
Thank you.
Well, I'm old and I do have a Facebook.
It's okay.
No, I mean, I try to keep that one active, but yeah, I also I have my Facebook, my Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky. TikTok is where I tend to be a little bit more active, and you'll find me under Abel Z Author or Abel Z Author, ABEL. For those that are looking for it in English, because it's people tend to look for ABL. I'm like, no, it's ABL. So yeah, that's how you'll find me, and then also AbelZAuthor at Gmail if anyone wants to reach out via email.
Thank you.
Chit-chat.
Thank you so much for that. Because I meant to do that in the beginning, but got a little sidetracked. So let's go back to talking a bit more about your books. Rios, can you talk about how has your writing process changed from when you first started writing to now?
Okay, yeah. So the way that I started with writing, like if I think of myself, if I envision myself back then, it's like I just feel like a woman in like wilderness and just like grabbing at shit, like you know, like grabbing ideas, like grabbing memories, and so when I initially started writing, so with The Pulse Between Dimensions in the Desert, it really was based around conversations that I heard, family stories that I heard, experiences that I had on my own and fictionalizing them. So that was really where I was pulling from. And then with Itza, I knew that I wanted to tell, so thematically with Itza, I knew that I wanted to tell a body story. And all that I mean by body story is like the history of someone's body and how that impacts like the rest of their life. And I knew that I wanted to write a survivor story. So I don't know how, like, I'll just say this as like just very briefly, and whatever you need to do for the record. But so I am a survivor of childhood sexual assault, and one of the themes in Itza is that's what happens to Marisol, and I wanted to create a survivor story that shows how trauma can impact your memories, right? So Itza is written in vignettes on purpose. Itza is written in fragments on purpose. It's written in different point of views on purpose. And I knew that I wanted to do that from the beginning. So really the way that I organized Itza was by whose stories did I want to tell that would, so Marisol, the main character, she was like the sun, right? So she's in the middle. So like, I was like, well, what are the things that are going to orbit around her? And so themes that I wanted were community. And what does that look like for community to help a little girl who's a survivor? What does it look like for ancestors to come in and help a little girl who's a survivor? What does sisterhood look like to her? What does magic look like to her? What does a villain look like to her as a survivor? And so like, even within the book, another thing that I wanted to do purposely is I did not name the perpetrator of her trauma. So in the book, he's just called the fake father. He doesn't have a name. He's just the fake father. And like, that's that. And I knew that was something else that I wanted to do, was just give him the least amount of power that he could have within the story, but knowing that he had to be a part of it. So giving him the least amount of power, and then also the spell portion. So the spell portion, I knew that I wanted to create a spell for her. And so the way that the spell works is, as more people read Marisol's story, he disappears further and further into nothing. Because to me, that's what abusers are. They're nothing, right? So so for her, that's what happens as more people read her story, her family story, her lineage. I'm someone who I'm trying to get better at organization. So, like, if we want to get into like the actual process of writing, at this moment, I'm working on a novel, and I have been the most organized than I've ever been, and so that's just been starting. I like to start with research, so depending on the stories that I'm trying to tell, I will research around that. And typically the resources that I use are JSTOR. So JSTOR is like an online academic library, and you just need an email and password, and you can access 100 articles per month for free. And so when I feel academic, that's where I go. I think, that's really, I guess I can just stop there.
No, you're good. You're good. I know it's hard. It's hard to figure out when to stop talking. I still struggle with that. No, I would listen to you all day long. Well, first of all, thank you so much for sharing that. As we were talking, I was trying to find a bit in the book. I had dog-eared it, or I thought I did, but Alita's response to, or what she wanted her response to be in that moment, and then instead she just moved forward in silence. And you have such a visceral way of writing, and it's such a beautiful thing to behold, because when I was reading Itza and An Altar of Stories, Liminal Saints, I was just so captivated by how much I felt your writing in my body, and it was just truly a feat that you accomplished very well. I think that in Itza you do a very good job of, like you said, telling the story in vignettes, and I now understanding more of like how the spell works and all of that. I love that, first of all. That's incredible. And in An Altar of Stories, Liminal Saints, each story has its own way of creating a different type of reaction. And whether it's feeling safe, or whether it's feeling loved, or grossed out, or horrified, you just do a brilliant job of that. So I highly recommend it to anyone who's listening. Read those books.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your kind words. Like, that really means a lot to me. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And I was reading Itza in An Altar of Liminal Saints this morning, and I got about like halfway through both, but let me just pick it up for the camera real fast. These are the books. Oh no, that's a horrible angle. Sorry. But they are quite tiny. So anyone who is thinking that you want to pick these books up, you could read them in a day. You could read all three of them in a day, in a sitting. And those are some of my favorite books to read, because it really just has a way of pulling you in to her story. And to all of the stories in the short stories. And I think that I'm highly looking forward to reading A Pulse Between Dimensions in the Desert, because I know it'll have that same like visceral bodily feeling. And I think in today's day and age, where we spend, at least I do, spend a lot of our time scrolling, it can feel a little numbing sometimes.
Yeah.
So picking up a book like that really like is a shock to the system. You're like, oh shit, like I'm a real person, I'm alive. Oh my gosh. And then same to you about when I was reading When Palomas Visit. Let's see, how far did I get? I got, oh wait, is there a part 1 and part 2? And
yeah, there's actually 3 parts.
Okay, yes, I got to the end of part 1.
Okay.
And yeah, so it was so beautiful to read, and I very much see the work and dedication you put into it, and the love and the history and the magical realism of it all, and the time travel. It's just such a fun read, but also deep. I think both of your just stories can be described that way, as just deep and entertaining and serious in the moments that need to be serious. When Palomas visits, let's see, I had dog-eared a page. Let's see.
I watched your interview with who was the previous author, E.A.
Yeah, E.A. Noble.
And you mentioned the dog-eared part. I was like,
Yeah.
I was thinking the same thing that she thought. I was like, yeah, I want my book to be here. Mark, do whatever you want.
Oh my gosh. I will definitely be doing that. Wait, I never asked Abel the last question. Is there anything you would like to tell us about your writing process? Back to the question.
And then I have a question as well for you, Abel. Were there, you can answer this after, were there specific movies that inspired like the time travel aspects? So that's my
Yes.
That's a lot of fun. So before I started, just like anyone else, chaos. Just like, where do you pull from? And then, like you said, there's ideas here, ideas there, and you're just throwing everything else out there. But like I said, for me, one of the most important things was to heal, despite my mother passing over 30 years ago, and also just wanting to bring this story that I read at some point that stuck with me, and I have the book, but I wanted it in my own voice, and I wanted it to represent the people that I grew up with. Like I said, I live in Cincinnati, but my story is mostly set in Chicago. The places that you read about in the story, the people. I told someone recently, I was like, you know what, I took the easy route in my first book because this is heavily inspired on people that I know. This is heavily inspired on places. Even my wife's old car is in there. My sister, my family's dog that passed a few. Sometime in the middle of me writing this book, he's in there. I mean, there's just so much, and many of the little things that I remember from my childhood in Chicago as well as in Mexico. So at that point, once I started figuring out what I wanted to write and how I wanted to fictionalize that portion of my life, then I kind of just started trying to organize myself as far as how am I going to start the story? Where is it leading? One of the things that my friend Victor Velez, who's a mentor I mentioned, he said is what will help you out a lot is know how your story is going to end. Once I knew how it was going to end, and it did change per my editor, she suggested, and I said, yes, I have to change that little part. I'm not going to ruin it, but I had to make a minor change to the ending, but essentially it is what I put in the story. But once I started figuring that out, that's where I kind of just applied myself in the story. I did move a few things. For example, before the part one, it starts in the middle of where Damian goes to his father's house. He finds the lost VHS tape, and he pops it in, and he goes back in time, and he reunites with those people in the movie. Which I have a VHS tape that's most of the stuff in the story. It's in the book. Not everything, but I kind of based it around there. And I based a lot of the people that are in there on people that I've known. And this probably won't sound, I don't know how it'll sound, but the villain in the story, I mean, my dad is nothing like the antagonist in the story, but dealing with the trauma of my mother passing, I'm also dealing with the trauma or, whatever happened between my father and me, that he went on and lived, his own life with his wife and his other children. So those are things I kind of dealt with, and I thought, fortunately, the antagonist is going to be the father of my main character. Eventually I started working with all these little things and just fictionalizing a lot of the stuff. The school's real. Like I said, that one car is real, and it's just briefly mentioned. The fact that my sister used to call my wife Xochitl. She couldn't remember her name, and I kind of just I was like, you know what, this character is going to be based on my wife Xochitl, Francis, and I initially gave Xochitl a little bit of anxiety, and turns out Damian is the one that's dealing with more anxiety than she is. So I kind of try to give her a strong voice, and eventually just everything kind of just thanks to all the videos that I was watching on YouTube, on TikTok, and everything that I would dive myself into social media. I've seen your writing prompts, Rios. I didn't know about your workshops, but I know about your writing prompts, and all those little things were things that helped me in being able to develop the story, as well as what I'm currently working on, which I think I'm a little more organized, but same, I'm just kind of like chaos. It's just chaos. And I like the thing that you mentioned about the antagonist in your story, Rios, about the fact that he slowly disappears. And I remember now that I'm thinking about it, you had mentioned that in a previous video. And in Ignacio's case, the antagonist in When Palomas Visit, I'm not going to ruin the ending, but my editor said that's perfect because that's what he deserves. And it's not that he disappears, but just what he had coming to him. That's perfect. Now, I don't want that for my dad. I mean, we don't communicate, but I don't want that for my dad. He's nothing like Ignacio, but there's just those little things that kind of stuck with me that kind of helped me in dealing with my own personal traumas. And as far as the time travel aspect, Rios, I mean, there's a lot of stuff. The biggest things that I kind of that I applied on there, there's a little Back to the Future. I love Back to the Future. In fact, there's a doctor that meets with Damian and his sister Sophia when Paloma's in the hospital. And initially, I named him something else based off of another character. I forgot what it was. But then I was like, you know what? This is sort of a time travel story. Let's give him Doc's kind of characteristics. And little Damian is like, he's telling his sister Sophia, it's like, Sophie, that's Doc from the movie. And she's like, no, it's not. But, when you read it, you kind of just imagine that's sort of a person that's part of that.
Yeah.
And then there's a book, I don't know if you've read it yet, by a Japanese author, Before the Coffee Gets Cold.
Oh, yes.
Time travel. I love the first book, and I kind of applied some of the rules. That's why the time travel aspect is not like your traditional time travel, where you go back in time and you come back and things change. There's a reason why things don't change when he goes back in time. He goes back, he comes back, and things remain the same. In fact, the first time that Damian goes back in time and he comes back, he's hoping to see his mother, but nothing changed. So those are I kind of just based it off of that. And then there's other books that there's a movie Volver with Penelope Cruz that was also a big inspiration.
That's one of my favorite movies.
Oh, God, I have to watch that one again, but for the moment I watched it in the theater. I love that movie. There was also Solito. I don't know if you've read that book by Javier Zamora. It's such a great book. It's a memoir, and there's a little piece of a character named Amaya, who's she's a queer character, and she helps out Damian a lot. There's a part where she comes to the U.S., she crosses the border, and I kind of just based off of what I remember from Solito, kind of based it off of that. And then there's Somewhere in Time with Christopher Reeve, which is a really old movie. I don't know if you've heard of it or know of it, where he finds a painting and he falls in love with the actress from 50 years or so, and he kind of just teaches himself he hypnotizes himself to eventually go back in time and be with this actor, which you should watch this movie. It's such a wonderful movie. It's gonna break your heart, but it's such a good movie.
As all good stories do.
Yeah. And then the other one that was a big help with writing the story was a movie with Topher Grace, Pleasantville, with Topher Grace and Reese Witherspoon, where they kind of magically go into the Leave It to Beaver type of TV show, and that's kind of where the pulling into the movie is inspired by or based off of. So yeah, that's a little bit of my writing process and everything that comes along with it.
Well, I definitely have some movies to add to my to be watched. Something that you had said just sort of like triggered my mind into thinking of there's something so uniquely human about both of your stories in your writing, in a time where AI is sort of being taking over, especially in the creative space. I don't think it's the easy way out of using your own life experiences. I think it adds to the story, and that's something that AI just can't recreate. That there's something so human about putting our thoughts, emotions, and memories in putting it into the writing, putting it into the stories. And I just wanted to say that to everyone listening, please don't use AI. It's such a, that's the easy way out, is AI. And if you are using it to do any of your writing, please just stop writing. How about that? Just stop.
One of the things that I forgot to mention that Rios talked about was also research. I also did some research as well, and I think it's important too that when we are creating stories that we research things that we're going to be doing, because that we're going to be writing about, because eventually if you put something on the page and it's not right, people are going to know.
Yeah.
And right now with everything that's going on with the immigrant community, one of the scenes in Juan Paloma's visit, Sofia is deported. And it would have been easy for me to write that ICE came to the factory. This is back in 1989. So on the importance of doing research, I come to find out that ICE wasn't created. There were immigration officers in our government back then, but ICE wasn't officially created until I want to say like late 2000s, maybe late 90s. I could be wrong, but those are little things that we kind of as writers have to be aware of. And even though I don't necessarily do the research first, I do make note of things, especially things that I don't know. Make a note of it, so research it later to make sure, or interview people, or to make sure that the whatever I'm bringing onto the page or whatever it is that I'm doing, that it's accurate.
Yeah, that's a super good point. That's like such a small thing of like, oh, like let me just make sure that this was like actually established when I was reading that, or like when you were writing that. To ask, because I know we've already been on an hour, so I want to be cognizant of your time. Let's see, what are your current projects, if any, that you're working on? I know, Rios, you mentioned you're working on a book.
Yeah, so I am currently working on a horror novel. The goal is to write a novel that's at least 50,000 words. I tend to write in short spurts, as you like by the size of the books. You can tell that. But yeah, so I wanted to give myself the challenge of writing a horror novel. It's about a haunted apartment complex. It's about motherhood and loss. It's about matriarchs. I love writing about matriarchs. And yeah, I'm currently in the, I don't know what to, I'm in the first draft. So
Okay.
I'm in the first draft part of it currently. So I'm working on that. I'm also teaching myself how to write screenplays. And yeah, that's another thing that I want to eventually explore is making little short films, and then eventually like full length. Am I working on anything else? And then I have something else that I have planned, but I haven't started working on it. But yes, those are the.
That's so exciting, and I could so see that for you, because by the way, your writing style, like I said, is just so bodily. Like you can just feel it in your bones and your soul, and I'm 100% confident that would translate well in a screenplay and on film. So thank you for sharing that. Abel, do you have any projects you're working on?
Yeah, so I'm also working on my second book, and as I mentioned, my first book, I took the easy route. The second one is a little bit harder, but I'm trying my best to make sure that I apply everything that I've learned and to try to polish the story as best as possible. It's the fourth draft, but not really. It's more like the second draft.
Mm-hmm.
So I completed the first draft. I dabbled with the second and third, and I wasn't completely happy. So I kind of just started over with another draft, basing it off of the first one. And it's also going to be horror. I'm gonna see if I can apply a little bit of a horror comedy to it.
Horror.
So there's little things in there that I'm just like, oh my god, I make myself laugh all of a sudden. Like, I hope it translates well. When I finished with Paloma's Visit, I wanted to write a story based off the Brujas of Tlepalhuiche, I think it's called. I forget exactly what it's called. I don't know if you've heard of them. But in certain parts of Mexico, in Mexico City, there's these vampiric witches. Mm-hmm. And legend says, they come out at night, they tend to suck the blood of children. So I kind of wanted to write something like that, but I don't feel, or at least I didn't feel as confident when I started playing with the idea, so it's kind of just in a separate folder. So I told my wife one day, I said, she loves gingerbread men, and I said, do you want me to write a Pinocchio type of story that's adventure or revenge? And she automatically said revenge. And it's funny I mentioned that now because I went and bought a cookie cutter, cookie cutter to help me to help with the inspiration. That's kind of like the little character in the story.
I love that. So
the story is titled Augie, like Agustin, and this one's going to be set in Ohio. And it's essentially the story of Frankie, who owns a coffee shop. She owns a bakery, and I'm adding a little bit more of the pan dulce aspect to it. She and her ex-fiance lost their son in a fire, little 10-year-old Augie. And a few years later, she's talking with her friend Lucy, and Lucy tends to believe in magic and the occult, and she believes in angels, and she believes in spells. So she convinces Frankie to see if they can communicate with Augie, except it fails. And after Lucy leaves, Frankie's playing with she's making some gingerbread cookies, and she grabs Augie's ashes and she mixes it. And she realizes, this isn't sanitary, this isn't right. She throws the dough away, but then little Augie comes to life. Mm. And eventually it's turning into where he needs to feed off of others in order to be a real boy. So that's kind of where I'm going with that. And like I said, I finished the first draft, and I'm kind of polishing a lot of things. And I mean, I still have quite a few drafts before I actually send it to an editor. So that's one of the things that I'm working on. And then there's a few other things that I have in my separate folders. Outside of writing, as I mentioned, I work at radio, so I'm always busy with radio-related things. I was just also in a friend of mine, Cincy Fringe. It's a theater festival that just took place, that's actually still taking place this week. So I was part of that, where I was narrating as he and his partner stands. I'm always looking for theater, and now that you mentioned the screenwriting, it just dawned on me a couple days ago. I'm like, I kind of want to write a play.
Ooh, yeah.
Do it.
I do want to. I just don't know what yet. And one of the things about Cincinnati is that, the 15 years that my wife and I have been here, it was a struggle to find the Latino, Latina, and Latina communities. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's because it has grown a lot, but also working in radio, I work at a regional Mexican radio station. It helped me find a lot of the people that I knew back home in Chicago, the community that I belonged to. So that helped me in finding my friend Gabo, who's a dancer, and occasionally he'll be like, hey, do you want to do this? I'm like, yeah, absolutely, let's do that. So little things like that. And with Paloma's Visit, I do have in Columbus, Ohio, they're doing a Day of the Dead festival that they've done for the past 2 years. So I'll be there talking about the book, considering that it also takes place during Dia de los Muertos. And I think that's all I have right now.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so excited to see what you both do next, because I know it will be amazing. And I just wanted to close this out saying again, thank you so much for being here. And to those of you who are listening, please engage in your communities, whether it's your online community or your in-person community. Considering what's going on in the world right now, we need community more than ever, and we need to use our voices. So with that, thank you so much.